Alexander Pope once said, "Blessed is he who expects nothing, for he shall never be disappointed." Well, I say, fuck you. You're listening to Can't Read, Can't Write. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Can't Read, Can't Write, the podcast that proves Spartans can talk. I'm Mike Jones, joined as always by the guy who told you fools to your faces that this team could go 8-4, Kevin Grech, and special guest, the man who implicitly called us nobodies in Lansing's paper of record, Graham Couch. Graham, welcome to the pod. Good to see you again.
Yeah, same. You guys really stepped it up in terms of studio quality and production value since the last time I was here. I am impressed. This feels very professional.
Yeah, well, you had three links you had to click on last time you were here, I think.
Yeah.
Well, when the columnist of the Lansing State Journal, writes a piece saying that nobody's talking about the big changes in the NCAA, it hurts. It gets you right here. And we did a whole evaluation, and some of these changes you're seeing now. So we have you to thank for all of this, all the investments that have been made.
Where do you think I get most of my story ideas? It's straight from you guys. I just borrow them and, I'll use that this week. It'll be good.
No one will know. No one will claim.
Yeah, no one cares. No one's listening to those idiots. Let's just roll. Let's go.
If you hear some fireworks tonight, the west side of Lansing is alive and happening on Labor Day. So that just be prepared, We don't stop.
I love that. We'll just take it as a celebration of us. In the meantime, we do, of course, want to thank everyone for listening. And if we could ask a small favor, please share the pod with Spartans Your Life. Rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get podcasts. And, of course, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Spartan_pod. Same for YouTube. Like, comment, all that other nonsense. Plum is not here. Grech. You want to give the listeners a breakdown other than Graham's going to sit with us for the green wall. What else we're going to chat about today?
Well, we are here with the green wall or the blue wall or whatever, some kind of wall himself. Graham, talk about the game, talk about how right we were about it, how wrong we were, look forward a little bit, look backward. From there, we'll preview the Terrapins, talk about things that are happening off Grand River a little bit. And then, as always, take your Twitter questions.
All right, let's get into it. So Florida Atlantic comes to visit Michigan State University, and the Spartans escape, ? With a win, 16-10. Graham, you get paid to watch these things maybe more than once. I'm curious, having had time to reflect on the game, did your impressions change from leaving the game to, say, today?
Not a ton. Outside of Jonathan Smith in his press conference talking about being happy with protection, that didn't stand out to me, and so I'm gonna go back and watch it one more time, I think, and just sort of watch just for protection at some point and see that the offensive line was okay there. But outside of things like that, no. I mean, everything I think you're thinking is what I'm thinking, and what I saw. It was, it was an offense that if that is what the offense is all year, this is going to be a problem for them.
Right.
I think there are some things to work with that are reason to think that they could be a little bit better, and this isn't everything they have to work with. But and then defensively, they haven't faced a team that really features the forward pass, which is a thing that's used in modern football. But based on the team that was in front of them, I thought they did a really nice job, and I thought the way they came at them with pressure and waves and tackled in space, I thought those were really good signs, and they did about what they could do against the opponent they were facing.
Well, so I guess let's dig it. Go ahead, Greg.
Well, I was going to say, on offense, if there's anything to be optimistic about, it seems like a couple big turnovers, particularly in the red zone, including a turnover on downs. But let's say that they execute on those, or they at least get a field goal. Are we talking about this game entirely differently right now? Or would that be fool's gold? This is this team. Is it not worth doing those hypotheticals? What do you think? Is this the team, or is there another version of this game where we don't feel this way about it?
Yeah, I think even if, say they don't have that interception at the goal line for one, and they score there and they win more comfortably. Say the final score is like it was in the Michigan Fresno State game, where that game was really tight, and yet you get the pick six, and so it feels like there's a little more separation. I still think everybody would know deep down that wasn't an offensive performance that was all that inspiring, or that looked like it was smooth and clicked and was potentially electrifying. And so, yeah, it might feel a little like, and in some ways it was better that didn't happen, because there would be some fool's gold. But I think one of the other things that was an important takeaway on the positive side is the defense had to face the game when the situation was dicey, right? And so that to me is, if that game is a 2-3 touchdown game, they're never facing that pressure. And I don't know that last year's defense wins that game. And I think that would be the one positive note of it being close there, is we did learn something about the defense in that situation. They did also get one pretty fortunate call in terms of that ruling, in terms of how that on fourth down, the penalty being enforced after the turnover, but still, nonetheless, they got the job done.
Which was really interesting in the stadium, watching your team get the ball back, but also it advances down the field 30 yards. And the officials, their microphones aren't working in the building, so everyone around.
They weren't on TV either.
What happened? It
wasn't exactly working.
It's wild.
Yeah, it wasn't working in the press box. We had, it was very hard. I mean, Solari was about losing it. He was like, because everybody at this point's on deadline. You're at the very end. You're trying to explain something in copy that has to be done before you can go downstairs. And I was just sitting there going, I'm going to write around that one. I don't really know what's going on. But,
Solari was ready to rappel out the window and down onto the field to get an answer on that one.
He was not happy. I did find it fitting, though. I thought that, in some ways, the frustration over the late slides throughout the game that led to some of the penalties. Well, this is the downside of that if you're the team that's sliding. Like the slide, you are down at the moment you begin the slide. Therefore, the ball is already turned over when the penalty happened. So it did what worked for them for a long time, sort of bit them at the critical moment.
Yeah.
Poetry.
I guess as an aside to all of that, I know Smith got asked about the sliding rule today, and gave the sort of typical coach, like, I'm not my place, right? I'm not advocating for changes, but it does seem like to me we're 10 years in now on targeting as a pretty consequential penalty, which now means that you've got guys who grew up playing this way and have been reinforced go low, go low, go low as it relates to tackling. The slide almost feels like it's introduced a dangerous. The sliding is dangerous because now you've enforced this whole mechanism of wrapping guys up around the leg, which leads to the head-to-head contact. This isn't about sour grapes as it relates to the game, but it does feel like they need to do something here for player safety. Otherwise you've got players hitting high.
Correct. And I remember right when they really started to enforce this, the next year when Pat Narduzzi was still the coordinator. And I remember being at a practice where all they did was lower, 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 hit lower, lower, lower. And and so now you get this situation where they are really taught to go at the legs. And I mean, there are a lot of different things. I think most players would tell you they'd rather get hit in the head than have their knees taken out, because it's, and obviously the long-term effects of that are debatable. But in terms of what goes on to their career in the short term. But beyond that, you're right. I think what they need to be able to do is review all of those. And if the player's already in their motion to tackle when the player slides, there's no penalty, period. Because that, to me, there's just no way to avoid that. If the player launches after the person slides, that's one thing. But to me, it's they're going to have to do something. I think
I'd one up and say they got to review that in real time, by the way, not slow-mo, like real speed.
Well, you should be able to see it. It's sort of like an umpire at first base that sees the ball as it hits the glove versus the foot hitting the base.
Yeah,
right.
You should be able to see that play developing, and you should be able to get that right most of the time, and really only review it if you have called a targeting, which is a very punitive call. If you call something that's going to throw somebody out of the game, then obviously you're going to review it anyway. But if in real time, you ought to be able to get that right, and that ought to be the basic of the rule. If they've already left their feet or they're already in their launch at the point somebody comes down, then it can't be a penalty.
What about players that appear to have messed with their helmet in some way so that it jettisons off like an escape capsule every time they get breathed upon? Should that be reviewed by some kind of equipment owner or something like that? Like, how do we as a society deal with probably 3/4 of all helmets I've ever seen get blown off a guy in one game? Like, how does that even begin to take place?
It was amazing. There's all sorts of. If we're going to get real technical, I've always said if I were an official and I wanted to get targeting out of the game, if I was an actual official, I would just throw out every quarterback and running back who led with their head on a sneak or a short run. And quickly we realize how absurd some of this stuff is, because it's just really hard to play the game at that speed and never have your head forward and never helmet to helmet. I think intent has to be a big thing that people look at. What is somebody trying to do? If you're launching at somebody, there's some obvious plays. We know what targeting really is, and we know what it isn't.
Yeah, it's a real bummer watching them slow the play down, and you're like, he landed on the head, and it's like, well, so look, I think it's easy. Maybe I guess I think the other piece of optimism, I got two for you. And I'm curious, this team is on the offensive side of the ball young or inexperienced anyway. You look at the wide receiver spot, notwithstanding Montori Foster, most of them don't have a ton of snaps or are, in some cases, redshirt freshmen or true freshmen. The offensive line, I think, is rocking at least two dudes who have never played meaningful snaps for the Spartans before, in Phillips and Stanton Ramel. Is there, and then two of the three tight ends are redshirt freshmen as well, I believe, in Masunis and Pericek, and then I guess Fillet is, I don't know what year he is, but he didn't play at all last year, right? Like, maybe there's reason to believe that the idea of growth between game one and game two that people sort of rely on as an adage, that could be a thing here.
Yeah, I think what happened is totally understandable. It's just not what people wanted. I
was very unsatisfied watching this game.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Until you see it on the field, there's always that chance, and there's always the chance of the Kenneth Walker moment, right? Like, you're at Northwestern in 2001. And this guy takes the first handoff around the edge 75 yards, and the season's not going to be anything like what you thought it was, because this guy's that good. And there was always that chance that even though he's still 18 years old and he's never started a game, that this quarterback is just going to be, it's going to be like Cedric Irvin when he showed up 25 years ago and scored 4 touchdowns or whatever. That didn't happen. And so as soon as that wasn't going to, and it was pretty clear early on, it's like, okay, there's a real chance.
Some might say the first play.
Yeah. This is going to be a slog, and they don't have, and maybe Nick Marsh as he gets into the swing of things, or maybe Antonio Gates Jr. eventually the light comes on, but they don't have a lot of guys who scare you, and real playmakers, dynamic guys. They didn't last year. It was a huge problem. And they don't really now, except they've added this quarterback who everybody has high hopes for, and I think still should have high hopes for. So I think that's the problem. Once he's not on his own, just sort of game ready and ready to be dynamic himself, the rest of the offense is going to take a minute, and I don't think there's any way around that. I think I think there are challenges. This is going to be a challenge in college football. You pay these guys now, just like in the NFL, where you pay the quarterback a lot, even sometimes before they come in, big man on campus, didn't have to fight. The job is theirs. You're brought in to be the guy. You're 18, 19 years old. Like, there is pressure to come out and just be something, be a star, be a player. And what you really need to do at that stage is one snap at a time and just, find a rhythm and get going and sort of, and that's, I think that's a mindset that he's going to have to adapt. He comes out after the game and he sort of takes the blame, and that's fine. And except I don't know that he's going to be any better next week. It's not like he can sit up there every week and just totally say, my bad, I've got to get better. He's just going to lose his confidence at some point. They need to find ways to get him in rhythm, help him out, and then, and explain to him that you're 19 and, or he's not even 19 yet. And you're going to be a second game starter and we're going to be in this together, that sort of thing. But try to find ways that he can have some success and build some confidence to let that athletic ability and other things sort of take hold.
You said they don't have any guys that scare you. I would disagree with that. The wide receiver crew scares me. These guys can't get any kind of separation. They can't seem to do anything. Child's first interception is because Montori Foster's just bumbling around. He doesn't know where he is on the planet.
Wasn't a pick.
Okay, there's also that. But we won't go there. So Smith was asked about this today, and I think he was a little bit more critical of the offensive line than he was of the wide receiver core, which is interesting because, as Jonesy, you pointed out, Pro Football Focus graded our line for what it's worth pretty well in the last game. So what do you think? Where do we put the blame for something like that? Obviously, Aiden's, novice, getting his legs under him. But I didn't see anything from the wide receiver core, but also, did he have the time, or was he just running around back there with his hair on fire?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'll go back and look at the protections. I don't think that was a huge issue. He doesn't have – there wasn't a lot of separation. They just don't have those sort of guys. Yeah. Foster, I'm curious to Montori Foster, and I don't think we have a great answer for this, and might in the next couple of days. He was banged up a little in camp, and I do wonder if he is a little out of rhythm, a little out of sorts, and because he's somebody I thought – was going to have a decent season. I didn't think he doesn't have star potential, but he has a guy you can count on potential, I thought. And so I was a little surprised to see him have the struggles he did. We'll see, we'll see how they do next week. I wouldn't quite give up on him. Yeah, he had some moments last year when nothing else was working, some great catches and a couple plays where he looked like a pretty reliable guy. But they don't have somebody who scares you. The offensive line just, they've got the great Tanner Miller block that leads to the Kyron Lynch-Adams run. And you see the talent there, and so you have some moments. I thought Lynch-Adams was pretty good, and is somebody that, and I think they're aware of this. He was the better running back, and you'll start to see those carries, go toward him a little more, at least even up this week. And so that's something they can look at. But the offensive line, there were two. On 4th and 1.5, the fourth down call that should have been a fourth down call, should have been a field goal. Part of the problem was you couldn't trust that line to get the tough yards, and you knew it by then. And Lynch-Adams, I think, had, maybe a step before he got hit. It was very, it's just not working.
Well, so I actually, watching from home, right, that I saw them sub out the personnel, and they brought in 3 tight ends for that play. And I was like, let's go. This is great. This is great, right? This is exactly the identity that you would want if you're Michigan State. And they, it was, I think, Velling, Masunis, and FAU came out. FAU's what, 6'7", right? Huge human being. And it got blown up through the 3 tight ends. So I that one in particular wasn't even on the offensive line, but in that moment, I don't know. It was one of those things that, I guess we shouldn't be surprised because 2 years ago and last year when we needed a yard, we couldn't get a yard. But I don't know, man. I'm a little bit lost.
It's kind of the Dan Campbell stuff, right? He does that stuff a lot, and sometimes it drives people nuts, but they're just going to keep doing it. That's his identity. I do think they wanted to send that match. They want that to be the identity. They wanted to do it there. It was interesting how quickly Jonathan Smith said, yeah, in hindsight, that was a mistake. I mean, they understood just based on what they'd seen in that game. And what I'll be very curious with him, and we don't have a sense of yet, he wasn't at Oregon State, from everything I've read, could tell he wasn't some overly aggressive fourth down guy. I mean, they went for it a fair bit, but will he be that? Will he be like a Dan Campbell going forward, and he's overly aggressive? I tend to think not, and just based on how quickly he said, yeah, that was a mistake, because it was a clear mistake. Just time and score, right? You're up, you go up 19. Given how dicey things were at that point, you do that, and but I understand how you feel too. I was like, oh, okay, and it's a moment where you learn about your team, and I think, to be fair to the coaching staff, they probably learned about their team right there too, and thought, well, we can't count.
That sucks. Yeah. Yeah. All right, so I guess to keep it a little bit on the negative for a second, the fans have turned immediately on Brian Lindgren as an offensive coordinator, and I'm a bit surprised because, I didn't hate the play call on that 4th and 1. I hated the execution of the play call, but there were things that in this game that felt interesting and clever to me. Is that just a normal fan reaction, or am I the only? Do I need to check for carbon monoxide? Should I be angrier?
It's one game with limited weapons, and every offensive coordinator, almost nobody looks great without the weapons. I mean, the Lions have a beloved offensive coordinator, and in his first season as a coordinator, weren't they like 1-6 at one point and got beat 29-0 in a game? It happens when you don't have the parts that are working. I also not sure that they wanted to show everything. Now they got in a situation where they had to do some things to win the game, but I think they were cognizant of going to Maryland this week and wanted to have some things they hadn't really used. I'm not gonna. It's just way too early. Even with the defense, I thought Joe Rossi's his approach is much more pleasing, and they played really well. But we also need to see them face the forward pass,
right?
And so you have to be cognizant on that. And then I think with Brian Lindgren, it's just such a crap job to be an offensive coordinator other than getting a huge salary. It's a crap job.
Other than being massively paid for a very ridiculous job.
Yeah, you just got. I mean, nobody is going to be happy with you most of the time. It's very because, and even if you do well, think about Dave Warren for a second, who was not a great coordinator, but he does hold every record in Spartan football from the 2014 year. That was the best year by a long way in the history of offense in Michigan State football. Nobody will ever give him an ounce of credit for that.
No, it's true. We certainly will not.
Yeah, and I'm not saying he necessarily deserves it. I'm just saying that's the way it works. That's all. It's after one game, it's too early.
Oregon State fans didn't like Lindgren, as far as we can tell, and yet we would have killed to have the points per game that they produced last year, or the running yard. I mean, at the end of the day, they call the plays. They don't actually.
Washington fans tried to get rid of Jonathan Smith as their coordinator in 2015-16. I was reading some of those articles. Nobody is ever good. You have to, if you're going to be a head coach, you got to get into the coordinator job and then get out of it fast enough.
As quickly as possible.
I was talking to Jonathan Smith a week and a half ago and asked him about his offense and where it came from. And he was very, and I didn't even think, this probably had nothing to do with trying not to take any credit for the offense one way or another, but he was very quick to say that he doesn't meddle in the offense too much. It's part of his philosophy, but Brian Lindgren calls it, those guys organize it. He might have a decision like 4th down or something will be his or a suggestion or things like that. But it's a good, if I'm a head coach, I'm staying the heck away from either coordinator. I could do it.
Right.
I don't know what those guys are doing, but I'm just, I'm focused on setting the culture here. That's my thing. That's it.
Mel Tucker's second biggest mistake was coaching the DBs. We all know
that's his second. You've got so many options. His first biggest mistake. Okay. We'll come back to that someday. Let's be more positive. Let's talk about other coordinators. In your piece in the LSJ, grading the outcome of the game. LSJ, subscribe. Everyone, get out there. You gave the defense a 7, which was higher than any of the other position groups and the coaching. So I agreed with that. It seemed like in all aspects of the defense, the backs, the linebackers, and on the line, pretty good performance in this game, right? Anything other than apparently injuries, and I think we'll get to those in a second, anything to be really concerned about? I guess not seeing much of a forward pass, but other than that.
Yeah, but you can only play the team that's on the other side of you, right? And no, I thought they did really well. I thought they were. I thought the number of defensive linemen who made plays in the backfield was the most promising thing. I mean, from Ken Talley, on down, like it was. I have not seen them look like that, and just the number of different guys. In fact, I was writing the quick takes and I was trying to put in moments, and like every time I would sort of think I had that section set, somebody else would make a play or somebody else would do something that was worth mentioning. And I thought they tackled in space really well, which is hard to do, especially early in the season. And it's something that if you don't do, you never really get better at. Like teams either have that or they don't usually, that's a positive sign. So what you don't know yet about them is coverage, right? We have no idea what they'll be in coverage because they didn't really face a team that made them cover. But they did get after the quarterback pretty well. They were aggressive. They were. I thought they layered their blitz as well, and they came at different times. I don't know. I was really impressed with it, and part of it is you've been watching this sort of bend but don't break defense for so long that it's more fits the identity of the program that people have kind of known over the last, for a lot of people, a long time. But again, it will be interesting to see how all of that works in unison if the back end's getting beat up by guys at Maryland and some speed, and like how quickly they're getting there. Are they getting there fast enough to disrupt the passing quarterback? What does it look like? Like this weekend gets real fascinating for that reason. But based on, as much as the offense, based on week one, you're going, the defense, you think almost the exact opposite about it.
I'll be fascinated. At least a lot of snaps they pressed on the corners pressed, which I think is probably a reflection of the dude can't throw the ball. So like, why wouldn't you press and try and get the guy off the route? Just takes longer, right? You might get home. But it'll be fascinating to see if, because that felt in that moment like, oh, we've crafted up a scheme that's appropriate for the opponent we're playing. Novel idea. I'm curious to see if we see adaptation week to week to week in a way that we didn't quite see with Scotty, notwithstanding a couple times that he ran a 4-3 against run-heavy teams. But Rossi seems smart.
Yeah, it's a good question. I asked Rossi, it was last week, about, the thing about, he's never going to give you what their plan is, unfortunately, but that's probably good for them, like, the specifics of what they're thinking.
Get it.
But I think that's a good thing to ask him. I think he could be available on Wednesday this week to get a sense of how much they build. They are known for using a number of different guises. He's done that for a kind of long time. And, the one, we talk about coordinators being disliked, right? And an easy job. He's been in the Big Ten a long time, and for the most part, been pretty well thought of everywhere he's been.
Yeah.
Let's get into that, into the culture, into what this team is going to look like from week to week moving forward. You've been through a press conference or two at this point. You've been through a few different head coaches. Is there something that feels different about what Jonathan Smith is doing? I know you just recently got to sit down with him for the first time, did the profile. As this is progressing and you're seeing how he's adapting week to week, what stands out to you? I'm curious.
Yeah, it is interesting because things have changed a little bit in how I perceive certain things. So early on, I didn't know if he was going to be. I mean, he wasn't bad. He wasn't great. He sort of, framed sentences like Yoda a little bit, like just in terms of sentence structure. And I found that entertaining. Nobody else was giggling, just me every time. But anyway, But it was, and I liked him for quoting him because everything he didn't drown. He was like the opposite of me. He didn't just keep talking with nothing to say. He just, when he finished what he was going to say, it was a short, sweet sentence. And
he does seem to speak in bullet points. He seems to like have bullet points in front of him, and he just shoots those off. And he's just like this, and then that's it.
and so that works. But I didn't know if we were really going to get much. Sitting certainly one-on-one, he gives you a lot more. He's really good. A group of us had sat down with him last spring, and for just an off-the-record roundtable for like an hour. He was fantastic, and so I knew then right away there was more depth to him, and he was more of an interesting guy than we had been able to see just in press conferences. But the last couple press conferences, sort of the game week press conference, or the press conference coming off the game, and then today's, I thought were really good, and where he was, because now you have data, right? You're responding to something. There are people who are unhappy, or you're this, and he is not defensive at all, willing to explain things. And obviously this gets more difficult if like they're 0-8 and people are starting to throw bars, or if 2 years from now they're supposed to be really good and they're not, and then there's a different vibe. But he's very disarming in that sense, because he's very respectful in how he answers. Like he's there in the conversation with you, which not a lot of coaches are. I mean, one of the things I hated about Jim Harbaugh is with just sort of these catatonic eyes looking through you like he didn't exist, and just it drove me nuts. It was disrespectful, and there were days with Mel Tucker where he just didn't give you anything. He was just not. Now there were times where he was pretty good, but there were other times he just wasn't that present or willing to give you anything. I think the willingness to explain things, to admit mistakes. He's been pretty forthcoming with injuries that are long-term and what his policy is going to be there. And that stood out to me, because I think it's going to be a decent give and take, because you feel like you can ask a question and he's going to answer it. And I think that's he's not going to tell you everything you want, but the last two press conferences I've liked, and I really like the way he handled the post game.
I'm curious. There's a lot that every coach makes about culture, resetting culture, and so from even talking to players, is there anything that seems authentic, not a buzzword, not the low ego, high output? Like, I mean, there's some things that you like seeing from the team, but I'm curious what resonates with you as like not BS.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of, I think that is the word about him that you hear the most, is that he is authentic. I mean, he really just doesn't care about much flash, right? It's about football. He likes his family. When we were talking about non-revenue sports, and like we were talking about a column I had written that you guys had talked about quite a bit. You guys really set the tone.
Who, us?
And,
we would do something like that? No, continue, please.
On the scholarship limits and all, everything going on in college sports. And he was talking about his own kids and just being, concerned for them that, that they might not have opportunities that wouldn't be there in college that he really wanted them to have because things would change. And so he does seem to me, I mean, you only know somebody as much as you know them, but he does seem to me, and just from talking to other people, from Courtney Hawkins, from other, just that it's a very different vibe. It is a very, it's a very family friendly, very little swagger. It's not what they're about. Now, in fairness to Mel Tucker, if you go pre-NIL era, swagger mattered in recruiting, and he was trying to do at Michigan State, and when he got hired, NIL did not exist, trying to do something that hadn't happened, recruit at a level that they hadn't been able to get to. And that's when the flash mattered. And I think, now it's just about having cash, and it's also about guys feeling like you can take them to the next level. And that's ultimately what the staff will have to be able to do, is they'll have to be able to develop guys will have to see guys becoming pros. One of the challenges, I mean, first of all, they should always have good wideouts. Did you see it in lower levels? But they should be able to get a wideout soon. The transfer portal, however it is, there's really no excuse for that long term. It's year one, whatever, that's fine. But in an offensive-minded head coach, who, once they have some success, like that ought to be something that just feeds itself. Guys see guys getting to the next level. Michigan State's a place that's had success sending guys to the NFL. But what's weird is you go back, even Keon Coleman thought he needed to go to Florida State, which he didn't. He just misread the situation, and it worked out fine for him. but like they've had a lot of receivers even recently go to the NFL. That ought to be something that they can recruit and that he can recruit. But you have to show guys you're going to get them there, and that matters more than swagger, I think. And, but yeah, he's different than Tucker, very different.
Yeah, it's crazy that Jaden Reed had just gone in the second round as a wide receiver, and then Keon Coleman was like, "Oh, I gotta leave to do that." I'm like, "What do you even?" I think there's a reason our fan.
And Jalen Naylor went in the 5th round the year before,
but he's stuck. He's made it. Whatever he did, he's made it. So yeah, it's.
I'm just laughing that Tucker, as an aside, I'm reminded that he used to make guys ask for being able to have a towel on there because he was like workmanship, meat and potatoes, but also had Lambos on the field. It just didn't.
It also had a brand binder. Graham, if you ever find out that Jonathan Smith has a brand binder, if you could send up a smoke signal on that just immediately, just let us know so we can just get ready. That would be fantastic. I would really appreciate that.
I hope he has like a clothing line we don't know about. Just because like the way he dresses, that would be amazing. It's a sub brand of Patagonia. He just sort of rebrands some Patagonias and sends them back
labeled it.
Yes.
Most of the shirts he wears, I'm like, that's the stuff my wife wouldn't let me wear in Paris. That's it.
All right. So, how before we're going to chat a little basketball and then we're going to chat about something no one's talking about. But how worried do you think fans should be about 3 major injuries in Game 1? 2 at the same position.
Yeah, not ideal, but not Xavier Henderson either. Probably, that
sure.
was not quite that level of when he and Snow went out together and what that did to that team. It's a good question. With Tatum especially, I don't know. It was too quick for me to understand the effect he was really having, and they haven't played a team with cover. I don't really know what they have there in terms of depth of talent.
Yeah,
I think they're okay. The problem they have now is they're already one down. Like, I don't view that injury as like, they can't overcome that. But you're expecting to have 1 or 2 injuries like that, but you'd like them to happen in week 5 and week 8. When one happens in week 1, you're already up against it. So when the next one hits you, we all remember in 2021 when they were great and then they weren't defensively because they just didn't have enough bodies by the time they got to Purdue to hang in there.
Yeah.
And I didn't mean they were great defensively. They were a very good team. And then they
were passable defensively.
And then they weren't. Yeah. And then there just wasn't anyone left at a certain point. So, anything else, Jonesy, on football before we move on to hoops?
Other than I hope Alante comes back so that he can get that elusive 1 touchdown in his career. That really honestly bums me out for him. But yeah, let's chat a little hoops. We chatted before the Spain trip that Izzo seemed happy for Izzo, like really seemed happy. He was tan. He had a little 5 o'clock shadow going on. Seemed more joyous. Do you think any of that changed post Spain? Like, I know you got 2 wins, 1 loss, but it looks like they're still got some problems at the 5.
I think just texting with one of the assistant coaches who said to me that like they really needed that last game. Like that was really good for them to take one, to play somebody at that level, to take one on the chin, to have to really fight to stay in it, not to go out there and just come back, having won 3 games and maybe played okay because I think for all these guys, you think about the idea. I mean, these guys all want to be in the pros too. They all want to be NBA players. And when you go overseas and a team of guys who didn't make it in the NBA are too good for you, that's a moment that lets you know there's work to be done, right? Even though that team would win the Big Ten, it's still like, okay, there is another level. We're not, I've got to keep working on it. I don't think, there's nothing that I think Izzo is probably in a pretty good place. He usually is this time of year. I think he likes the team he has. I think he likes their potential. His point guard is different than last year, which I think helps his mood on a daily basis.
Helps mine.
And so I think there's all of that. That said, I think he misjudged. I think he thought they'd be better last year, and he misjudged. I think at this point last year he was feeling pretty good as well, and it just didn't pan out.
You talk about the idea of having to see that there's work to do, right? To be better. I'm curious who that's for. Is it like on the team, right? Because I don't want to write anyone off, but I assume there's some players that have a bit of a ceiling to them that maybe isn't getting to the league. Now, I think of Booker and Cohen Carr is potentially guys who, like, if Carr can find a shot, right, who might have the athleticism to get there. I don't know that Akins, we'll see. But, like, who needs to see that differential to make it click?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's healthy for the Xavier Bookers of the world, the guys who are going to be there. Like, I think it's good for him to see that, yeah, I still have some advantages offensively. This is where it works for me, athletically, I should say. But that, these guys are not the NBA, and that's where I'm going to be a year from now. And I've got to, just to, I think it's good for Akins, who really wants to be there. And like you said, I don't know if he'll ever get there. I think if he was 6'6", he'd be built to be a 3-and-D guy, and he's just not. And so it's going to be a tough slog for him to figure it out. But you saw even in that last game, he had struggled quite a bit in the first two, and you saw him sort of take it upon himself in some key moments and made some important plays. And we'll see what he is this year. He's not Tyson Walker as a guy who can like create offense on demand, and it's not. He's got to be in the flow. I think he can. And I don't think they necessarily need him to as much this year, but he's gonna figuring his role out and him figuring out his place and being comfortable with it, I think is part of this. Because you don't want him taking fadeaway jumpers late in the clock as your offensive option because he feels like he's the go-to guy. That's just not going to work. And I think the more what I thought he was really good at in that last game was he had 5 or 6 assists, a couple passes from the top of the key as he drove in sort of the free throw line area, find guys on the wing, like that sort of stuff. To me, is important. But I think it's just all of those guys who, the young guys, the Jeremy Fears, who I thought played really well for 3 games, or at least was reassuring, I should say, the way he played. The freshmen coming in, the guys who are battling for minutes. I mean, all those guys just seeing that a level that's not the NBA is still a level above them, I think is a really helpful thing.
Greg, go ahead, and then I got a last question on basketball.
No, you do it. Take us out, host Mike Jones.
I know you chat with him a decent amount, but there doesn't appear to be a center on his recruiting board. This isn't a recruiting podcast in a big way, but is he aware that's a position? Like, truly.
No more 5s. They're not going to play with them anymore after this.
Kohler and Cooper are going to graduate in a year. He doesn't have anyone in the pipeline at all.
And then presumably he's going to get access to more scholarships, right? That's going to open up. So
that he won't use.
Are certain members of the ISO going to get those scholarships? Like, how are those going to get doled out? Why not bring in some bigs, Brad?
It's a good question. I do think that small forwards are going to sue the NCAA for there to be no more centers in college basketball. That's going to be the next lawsuit that wins, and so you won't have to worry about this anymore. It's a good question, and I haven't talked to him lately about it. It is something that I think as we get into September and guys are starting to really commit for 2025. Although last thing I just saw, the whole the letter of intent may go away too.
Yeah,
so
I saw that.
Who knows how recruiting's
There's
actually
no
gonna
confidence about what your team is anymore whatsoever.
it's not good. But it's a fair question because like this year, when I'm watching them like I do think in the back of their minds a little bit as they were thinking about the center position and who to bring in, there were a few things at play. One was not upsetting the apple cart, as he said, or whatever it was, and them liking the idea of Kohler and Booker playing together a fair bit and all that stuff. One was a realization financially they're not where Indiana is in terms of NIL money. They, going out and spending like $1.2 million to go get somebody, isn't necessarily a doable thing, and how that changes it. But I also think there's a really good chance Xavier Booker is the 5 in their closing lineup for a lot. And you saw that in Spain, and I had another coach, not from Michigan State, text me watching the game, just saying, like, Cohen Carr has to start. Like, that version of Cohen Carr has to be your 4. Like, he has to be on the floor. Well, if that's happening, then where's Booker? And then
the 3.
When you start to do the math, the number of guards they have and wings, and you start to think about the end of the games, there's a really good chance Booker is your 5. And you're not going to say that to him coming into this year because he wants to be a 4. And he's picturing the NBA, which none of that matters. And none of these guys understand that. Like, Miles Bridges didn't understand that if you played the 4 in college, it wasn't going to hurt you at the next level. None of these guys ever quite grasp that. But somebody's in their ear, some uncle somewhere, and it's never helpful. But I do think that there was probably a part of them that thought, when we actually look at the framework of this roster, Xavier Booker is going to spend a decent chunk at the 5 too in big games, and that's sort of the answer. And we'll see if that's the answer. We'll see whether they can rebound and whether that makes sense. But that's been my hunch for a while, and I think you saw that play out in the closing lineup in Spain.
All right. But, if you talk to Tom, tell him we're curious.
I think that's your guess is. I don't have an answer for you there. I don't know.
There's a 26 one on the board, Graham. Truly, it's almost as if he's going to use the portal. That's the plan, to get a natty. He's going to wait till these guys get out of here, and then he's going to use the portal.
And maybe it is. I mean, that you may get to a point where that becomes sort of like quarterbacks. This is what you're going to do. You're going to try to have some guys you're developing as bigs, and then you're going to try to bring them into the portal. That may be the plan moving forward. It's a good question, though.
Let all the other teams figure out which ones are the good ones. Then you just sort of go pluck 1 or 2 of them from somewhere. From Long Beach State's bench, apparently.
It should be one of those schools. They should. Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's talk about the story that no one is talking about to end things out with you. So you've, of course, sat down with Alan Haller. You got great access to him. We, of course, know that he's listening now. Is he going to have to eat crow, though, in this whole thing? Like, looking at what Ohio State has announced, we want to have a competitive program in conference. Are you going to have to make very difficult choices about which teams you're going to support and which teams are going to stop existing, frankly?
Well, I do think that there will be tough decisions about the levels in which you fund teams to compete, and people will just have to come to that realization. And the question is, if you're not funding teams to compete at the highest level, then should you be funding them at all? And that's a fair question. Like, and it's going to get weird with some baseball is a great example because I don't think baseball will ever be a priority really at Michigan State. It shouldn't be a priority. It's a sport where there's still snow on the ground when they play their final home game half the year, and it just is what it is. And more schools, like in the Southeastern Conference, may decide to bolster the scholarship number instead of removing scholarships. The question is going to come down to this with men's sports, especially. You get 20 more football scholarships if this all gets approved. Now, nothing is set in stone yet where this is going. But if the agreement with the House settlement is what comes to pass, you'll have 20 more scholarships in football available to you that I don't think most programs need. Some won't want. Michigan State may not use them all. They may decide 95 is what they want to use annually, and I don't think that hurts the program. Coaches will tell you, like, it kills you. You can't have any walk-ons at all if you go to 105, which some coaches like having that around. You can only travel a certain amount. Most schools, I think it was Pat Forty did a thing on the number of players each SEC program used last year, and it was in the 50s. You can't use most of these guys, and it just leads to more guys transferring or unhappy. And most of these guys, it's just more money you're going to have to pay them in NIL up front. So I don't know that 105 helps you in football. But say they go to 95, say you want the 8 additional scholarships in hockey, if that's available, because you want to take every advantage of what you have, like the SEC has in baseball, you have with up north with hockey, and then you add 2 in men's basketball, which I don't know that they'll use, but you're using 20 to 30 somewhere you could have additionally that you're going to have to find out of other programs. Your wrestling programs, your all the tennis is kind of rolling right now, but with your baseball programs, other things. So those are really important questions. To the question whether Haller is on the record saying you'll have to find another AD before you cut sports.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know that I would have said that given the unknowns or what's coming down the pike. I think he said that to reassure people, which is if you can live up to it, it's good leadership. But if you can't,
Bad quote.
So
I remember the president of the university that signed my diploma said something about how you'd have to find a new president if you were going to pay the football players, and wouldn't you know it, she's long gone. So
she's just across the street.
Or she was for a while. I haven't seen her in a minute. So keeping in mind, you say you have to find those scholarships somewhere. Swimming was a sport that truly no one cared about. Like, the coaches didn't seem to care about it. The student athletes didn't seem to care about it. Has the administration, do you think, learned anything about the experience of cutting sports potentially, if they need to do it in the future, from that and how they handled it there?
One of the things that's hard is you'd never look good cutting sports because there's always an argument. And one of the problems you run into, and I think you do have to do this before you cut any sport at this day and age, the mistake with swimming is you say, look, we can't fund this anymore. Mm-hmm. If you want to fund it, it's going to have to be if you want to have this, we're going to have to self-fund it. Give them the opportunity to come up with a plan to do so. And then if they can't, then it is what it is, instead of just going out and cutting. I think that's sort of one of the things you're going to have to do. And there may be some answers. Like with men's tennis, there's quite a bit of NIL funding that's been coming in that's been helping them get these guys. And that's been a really interesting, and maybe you don't need scholarships there. You don't have that many scholarships in men's tennis anyway. And so that there might be some options if you have donors in the right areas, or you have people who want to fund something because it's important to them. And so I think those conversations need to be had. And some of these sports probably will get dinged a little in terms of the resources that can be put into them, and then they'll have to decide, how much they can sort of gin up on their own. I'm very curious to see this next year, because as all this stuff comes down the pike and players start getting paid and budgets are what they are. Now, there is more money coming in. I mean, that's part of the what's too bad in some ways, though, is I was very curious to see what MSU was going to do and what Haller was going to do when they first got the new media rights deal with the Big Ten. He said to me, you're going to see people's priorities with this because you're going to see where the money goes. And I think he was really eager to try to make them first class program in some of the non-rev sports. And, volleyball, the practice facility sort of thing you need. And a lot of those projects that some of those things I think are going to be hard to do. And now you may still get individual donors that say they want this. You get the donors for the new tennis facility, and that's earmarked for that. So there's things that could still happen, but I think that stuff's going to get harder to do, and it's not going to come from the media rights money like it would have. That money is going to be a big chunk of what they use now to pay the athletes.
This leads me. Go ahead, Jonesy.
Well, I got derailed. I'll come back to it. You go.
I threw you off on purpose. Yeah. I knew that I could needle you right there, and then I could get in one last question.
The worst scenario is when it's a press conference and that happens to you. The mic comes to you and you haven't thought, and then you're off in your own world, and all of a sudden you're like, I have no idea.
And then you're like, I'll just.
Stupid.
Oh, I've got it written down in front of me. I got it. Graham, here's the question for you. Kevin, take a seat. I'm curious. Is Haller, and I'm rooting for him. I love that he's invested and seemed to make competitive hires in the non-revs, and does seem to be dedicated in a way that is productive to MSU's long-term success. I like the actions he took on Mel Tucker. Like, we were pretty skeptical on this pod about Alan Haller being hired in the first place, and he's been, I think, surpassed our expectations.
But that was not about him personally. That was about it
No,
being
no,
an
no.
internal hire and not an external hire.
Yeah, and it wasn't acute to Allen, other than I think the whole MSUPD thing. But it doesn't matter.
That's
Very
okay.
happy for Allen, and want him to continue to succeed. Though, I am curious: is he agnostic on the direction of college sports, or does he have an opinion? Because it does feel like we're in a moment in trajectory where it matters to be a leader in this space, because you can help direct the narrative. And I don't want to Dabo Sweeney, obviously, but I do want someone who's maybe not just riding along the wave.
So I think he does have a voice in some of the discussions that happen with the Big Ten and SEC. So he does have a voice in some of those things that are going on. He does have, and he does want some level. Amateurism is probably the wrong word at this point, but he does want a path where, he thinks the players should be allowed to, or be compensated and all that stuff. But a path that he doesn't love the players as employees, put it that way. He doesn't love the athletes as employees, and so he's made that pretty clear. He also thinks there's a chance what's happening now. I think, and this is my sense from him. Things are probably changing in his world quicker than I'm aware of them. But that some of what's going on right now has a chance to save college athletics in ways that otherwise college athletics might be in real trouble. Like there's something that needs to be done. In other words, you can't. The status quo doesn't work. And so, in terms of where he stands, on each little thing. I don't have a great feel for that in terms of how it changes, or some stuff I don't have on record. But he's, I do think he is somebody who early on felt like he needed to take a back seat to more longer-term ADs in the Big Ten. People have been around State and other places, and I think he no longer feels that way. Like he feels comfortable in his skin in ways he didn't, 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
Greg, I'll give the last one to you.
No, I think we did it. I think we nailed it. Graham, thank you so much for your time. What was that, by the way? What are we sipping on this evening? I've got a wheezing the juice out of our friends over at Grand Armory. Curious, what was that, like a porter or something?
Was it a Guinness? Yeah, just a Guinness.
Guinness, my man. I like the dark beers in the summer. That's a bold move. Some people say that that's a move of a psychopath. I disagree.
It's the first day where it didn't hit 70 degrees. Some of us like to celebrate. The fat men like to celebrate that, So
that's right. We're settling. We're getting the muskox out. We're bottling around. We're having a Guinness. It's fall. It's past Labor Day. Let's go.
Well, no, I appreciate you guys having me, and look forward to doing it again.
No, we appreciate you. Obviously, everyone, we steal most of our information after Graham steals our information from the Lansing State Journal. You should read it. You should subscribe. And, of course, you can catch him on Couch in the Rube, which you should listen to on all the days you don't listen to this. Graham, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Talk soon.
Cheers.
All right. Thanks again to Graham Couch. And you can follow him on Twitter at Graham_Couch. And, of course, check him out on Couch in the Rube.
And the Lansing State Journal, Michael, the paper of record in mid-Michigan. Okay. Did you like that little bit there from the beginning? I liked it.
I did. Yeah. All right, Kevin, we have more to chat about, but we are going to first say a kind word about our friends, Mama's Mercantile and Eatery. Folks, if you didn't take a second traveling from Southeast Michigan up to East Lansing for the game to stop in the Oasis off of Clear Lake Road, please check them out. The next time you come up for a game, Mama's Mercantile and Eatery off of Clear Lake Road on 994. You can check them out at mamas.merc on Instagram. Great food, great drinks, great outdoor area. Kevin, anything more to add here?
Well, as we established, it's Guinness season. So the leaves, they are a change. And get yourself out there on that patio. Have yourself a porter, a little stout out there. It looks out over a nice little glen. It's got everything. It's got nature. It's got old equipment that you can look at and comment on. It's fantastic. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's got fire pits. Yep, perfect for the fall. If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't be an idiot. Get out to Mama's Mercantile and Eatery off of Clear Lake Road.
All right.
Exit 94.
I don't think we have anything off Grand River this week.
Well, we just kind of covered it. So I think we should cover the terrapins, don't you?
Yeah. What do we know about terrapins, Kevin?
Okay. Well, we learned some things about Maryland's football team in our conversation with Graham right now, but we didn't cover that much about the terrapins. Well, first off, did you know generally that turtles are some of the oldest living creatures on the planet? Like they date back in the fossil record like 215 million years. Did you have any idea about that?
That's not surprising because don't they certain turtles, not terrapins, to be very clear.
And we are primarily talking about terrapins here. We'll get to them in just a moment. But continue.
Don't certain turtles live a very long time?
Yeah, tortoises are like, how there's a heirloom piece of like a piece of furniture that gets handed down from generation to generation. Tortoises are like an heirloom animal where it's like, I think one of my roommates in college, his family had like their grandparents' tortoise that just lived in the garage. And you didn't.
Aren't lobsters that way too?
Could be like that. I did hear that lobsters don't technically or could theoretically be immortal, except for like environmental factors and those types of things end up killing them eventually. But I believe I read that somewhere.
Lobsters don't die of natural causes is the point.
Or only die of natural causes in their environment. Or murder. Or being boiled to death and then stabbed with a pitchfork.
And then there's tortoises, and then far down the scale are terrapins.
Yeah. One thing that you need to know about terrapins and how they're different from turtles is that they're normally found in brackish water environments.
It's brackish.
Brackish. I was going to ask, as a coastal guy, what do you know about brackish water environments?
So brackish water, for those who don't know, is where salt water meets fresh water. So interestingly, Kevin, you don't care, but I will tell you, when I lived in Connecticut.
I definitely don't care. But
yeah, to be very clear for all listeners, Connecticut is the worst. But I lived on brackish water, which is super fascinating. It's a unique ecosystem in and of itself.
So I spent my Labor Day weekend up at the Sleeping Bear Dunes, which is a inland freshwater sea, essentially. So I could not care less about brackish water. But you are correct. Estuaries, coastal lagoons, those types of things. They generally, if you want to differentiate them from turtles on site, they have a more streamlined, flatter shell. Their diet's a little different because they're coastal. They're primarily eating mollusks, the crustaceans, little vegetation there. And obviously, they have that higher tolerance for salinity, slight salinity water. So one thing that's interesting about terrapins is I was looking up what are the threats to terrapins because I thought I could make a joke about, I don't know, Spartans or football or something.
Wait, turns out, sorry. Did you see USC's hype video?
No, I did not see USC's hype video. Walk me through this. This is probably better than the content I had. So tell me about this.
Let's just say they sorely missed which side of the war the Trojan horse was on.
What?
They fully embraced the horse, not realizing that it was not the Trojans
the Trojans were the receivers of the horse, not the givers of the horse. Were they very much like, can you believe falling for a horse? Oh, idiots, dumb.
It was
For shame.
it was 10 out of 10. Like, holy shit.
This is meant to be one of America's finer academic institutions.
So this is my plug for, listen, when people amp up STEM education, and don't get me wrong, I got a kid and I'm deeply invested in a solid STEM education for my child, but liberal arts matter because you won't end up making that. Anyway, continue. Terrapins.
It turns out basically everything hunts terrapins. On the list of predators for terrapins, it was like pages long, and I had to click through it. And it included, this is my favorite thing, you know those like flexible things that you put on the bottom of your gutters to get the water further away from the house?
Yeah.
There was a picture of how that was disrupting a terrapin's walking motion, and he was like sort of half falling over. And it was like, truly everything will kill terrapins, as it turns out. So there it is. Now you know. Preview of terrapins.
Nailed it.
Don't install gutter downspouts if you want to help protect the terrapins. Also, anything else before we move on?
They have 2 quarterbacks, and their front 7 is pretty experienced. That's what I got.
Great.
But you had the better preview. All right, we're going to head to
the bit, but fine, it's fine.
The bit still works with 2 random. Anyway, we're going to head to Twitter questions. Of course, you can participate next week if you follow us on Twitter at Spartan_pod, same handle on Instagram, or you can email us can't read, can't write 1855 at gmail.com. That's can't without an apostrophe and can't without an apostrophe. Can't read, can't write 1855.
Great. First up from Mike Jones to you. We are currently on pace for 84 sacks this season. Tell me why I shouldn't vote Joe Rossi for president this fall. And we happen to know that Mike Jones has a swing state vote, so be very deliberate in your response.
Yeah, Mike Jones, you should not vote Joe Rossi for president. I love football and it runs a lot of my life, but do the right thing here. But
also, by the time election day comes around, we will no longer be on pace for 84 sacks this season. I can tell you that with a high degree of certainty.
But as we talked about with Graham, there was a lot in this game plan to like about Joe Rossi's approach. What will be super interesting watching the Maryland game. So I would encourage everyone to like watch the corners. See if they change it up from press coverage. But it was hard not to be pleased. It was really hard not to be pleased with the defensive effort there. Next up from Mike Jones, Greg, why didn't we burn all of Jay Johnson's playbook when he left? Who the fuck gave Brian Lindgren the 4th down play sheet? I disagree with this question.
There it is. There it is. That's what you were saying when we were talking to Graham. They're already out with their pitchforks for Brian Lindgren.
Mike Jones, the play was solid. Like, truly, when 3 tight ends trotted out on the field, I was like, let's fucking go. Like, this is great. This is refreshing. This isn't 3 wide receivers and a quarterback shotgun. Like, it was a great play call.
That did not come from the Jay Johnson playbook because that man didn't actually know what tight ends were or how to call plays for them. Next up from Thomas Zambiasi, Jonesy, is it really an MSU home opener if we didn't at least leave a little bit frustrated with the team?
Thomas, I get your point here. I really do. But it doesn't have to be this way. Right? Greg, it doesn't have to be this way.
I would like to see all of the openers. I mean, there have been times I can remember an opener where the defense outscored the offense, and I think we ended up doing really well that year.
But I will say this: I looked up Connor Cook's Western Michigan start, 2013.
Mm-hmm.
It was not substantially better than Aiden Childs'.
Yeah, because he's a gamer. That's because he's got to get his riverboat captain ready to go. But he was also like 20 when that happened, and not 18 in 3 months.
Well, but isn't that also more of a deference to Childs? That he,
Fair.
anyway, point being, Thomas, I don't. You're probably right when you say home opener because I'm like, well, Kenneth. No, whatever we did against the first home opener in the Kenneth Walker season was fine. I'm sure it was fine. I'm sure it was great. In fact,
Yeah, I mean that year also went on the road, beat Miami, and that instills a lot of confidence. Next question from Thomas. What makes Izzo call it a career quicker, winning the title or coaching the all doghouse team for a single game?
so this is a callback, listener. If you didn't catch last week's episode, it was last week, right? Was that Kate Wall who asked that question?
Mm-hmm.
Great question from Kate Wall for Izzo's all doghouse team. It for sure is winning the title, though. Right?
Yeah.
Like
in some ways, coaching
that just
the
makes him go
all-doghouse
harder.
team might make him just turn into. He might have to call it a career because he'll become a diamond. He'll just sort of like the pressure will become so great. He'll just crunch up and be unable to move after that. But coaching the title, I think we all agree Izzo probably calls it at that point.
And I think we'd all be fine.
Yeah, I'd be happy to have one. Next up from Beth Amaro, my 3 not so quick takes. 1, someone please tell Aiden not to force it. Can't lose him to an injury before he hits his stride. 2, whatever BTN pays Mike Pereira. I didn't. Yeah. This is one of the commentators, I presume.
He's the NFL, or not the NFL. He's the referee dude.
Oh, okay. Plum, get your agent on this. Can you imagine Plum out there coaching football?
Pereira came up the first play.
Right? Oh,
like it was. I mean, and even when he came back the second time, he was like, "Yeah, they got a little technical on that call, the interception call on the first one. It was anyway, but yet, dude has the cushest job in the entire world. He gets summoned to watch a play and then make a decision in slow-mo. And 3 from Beth Amaro, Greg, we need more guys with apostrophes and hyphens in their name, preferably both.
Have we had a both?
I don't know. Did you see we have a Carson Dash Wentz on our team?
No, I did not see we have a Carson Dash Wentz. How does that happen?
Long snapper.
Just
4.5-star long snapper.
Amazing.
Next up, Nestle's Quick Hotel. First question, Greg. What goes from grown to great first? Childs or the offensive line?
I'm going to go with Childs. It's just so many fewer moving parts. It's just one dude. The problem is for him to go from grown to great requires some assistance from the offensive line. So
a run game specifically.
Yeah. So this is tough, but it's I will believe it when I see it situation with the offensive line. That's where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
Next up from Nestle's Quick Hotel, Jonesy, should there be a rule against sliding? Kind of talked about this with Graham, but why, when an offensive player figures out a new way to hurt himself, it's the defense that has to adapt? See also running backs lowering their head and drawing a target.
Yeah, I actually kind of like the take that I had with Graham, which is that they can review the targeting, but it has to be in real time. It can't be slow-mo. Next up is Ji Kwang, which I Googled the pronunciation beforehand, so I'm dearly sorry if I got it wrong. Do you happen to do you think the bigger difference this year are players or coaching staff? The transfers have shown a high ceiling, but it's refreshing to see an offense and defense adjusting to their opponents and a special teams who knew what they were doing.
I mean, it's the coaching staff, right? it's got a lot of the guys that are playing are names that we recognize, including on special teams making big differences. Ryan, of course, is a holdover from the previous staff. So, and then
the
a lot
punter
of
is what you're talking about.
Yes, Ryan Eckley. Thank you. We're on a first name basis. We're just very familiar. We've been texting back and forth all week. That's my bad. That's my bad. That's my bad. And also they have a hand in who the players are that are playing and coming in from the transfer portal. So this is a difference in the staff, right? I think it's as simple as that. Do you disagree?
No, because particularly the players, we talked about this on the defensive preview, that the players who were left over were all really highly rated recruits. So, and it's unfortunate he's out for the season now, or likely out for the season. But Dylan Tatum was finally playing the position he was supposed to be playing, right? Like, they're just, there's better things about the staff. And it did seem, I will stick with, I mean, if he does the same thing against Maryland, I guess I'll be surprised. But Rossi seemed to have a scheme for this game that was tailored to the opponent that was in front of him. So, and I don't hate anything Lindgren did, but anyway,
except Jiquan, first off, thank you for the question. Appreciate you joining in. But I think special teams is a great example of why it is the coaching, because the players that were making a difference were on the team last year. And then the scheme and the differences in the coaching was making them a more complete unit generally.
Except for the blown coverage on that one.
Okay. Well, we're really focused on the positives right now, Mike Jones. Okay.
And that was technically Eckley's fault because he blew his own coverage. But anyway.
Okay. But listen, we're not.
But he did have that one stellar punt that landed at the one.
Got us 2 points.
Yeah. If your punter scores you essentially 2 points, then he can screw up another play. So it's fine. All right.
I'll read this one because it's actually to you from the Keith Ski. Jones, you have to play a series on defense. What position would you play?
Keith,
put yourself at rush end, please.
Yeah, I feel targeted on this one. Honestly, I think you're going to put me at DB. Hear me out. And you're going to blitz the shit out of the quarterback. Because then it's not my fault if the blitz doesn't get home. And I'm gonna press, and I'm gonna try and get the wide receiver off their mark. But I think that's the play. If you got me out there, is I'm gonna press, I'm gonna push, and you're gonna blitz the shit out of the quarterback, right? Next up, Greg, what's your favorite Slurpee flavor?
Well, first off, Keithski, I think this is probably a slight on me, that I'm a simple man and I probably have a Slurpee flavor. And you would be right to think that. I absolutely do. Yes. So let's say you're.
When's the last time you got a Slurpee?
Well, I'm about to answer that question. Let's say you're leaving the greater Detroit area, and instead of taking 94, where you can stop by Mama's Mercantile, you're taking 96. Maybe you're coming directly back to Lansing. You can stop at Howell, which normally I would not recommend under any circumstances. But there is a 7-Eleven there at the outlet mall that has a Rock and Rye Slurpee. And that would be my recommendation to you. Have yourself a little Fago Rock and Rye Slurpee and get as fast out of Howell as you possibly can, back on the road, back home to East Lansing. Do you have anything here? Do you have a Slurpee rack for the podcast?
No, I don't. I'm just, it's interesting to me that you know Howell well enough.
I've spent a lot of time
nights.
And the problem with
Bonfires.
Howl is that, the problem with Howl is that it's so far out of, the normal city centers that it gets really dark at night, and you do need to create. I'm not willing to go down this path. And
All right,
finally,
next.
Keesky has a question for Plum, but he's not here. Why do you spend so much time reffing soccer, then just stop? Well, the answer is he started again. So he didn't stop. The plan was to stop, but then he didn't stop.
But I don't think I actually do feel like I know this story, but I'm not going to answer it for him. So Keitski, feel free to resubmit this one. It's best coming from him. But I mean, if it's not clear, Plum did ref at very high levels of competition. Like, it's impressive what he was able to do, which makes his takes on the show all the more surprising. But his expertise and his experience with college athletes is like second to none. So it's great having him here. Wish he was here now, Alex. Next up, Spartan 18770. Greg, are you mad at Jonathan Smith or for not offering Sam Levitt a scholarship?
And this is when he was at Oregon State.
Yes.
Yeah, except for, as we covered at the time, Sam Levitt's reasons for leaving and citing this did not really hold water, because what's his name, who's at Arizona State or Arizona
also
State now,
did not offer him a scholarship.
did not. Yes, exactly. So that was a reason that people just pull out, of nowhere. Who among us hasn't had a breakup where you cite something that's not real so that you don't have to say what you're actually thinking?
And can you blame Sam Levitt for wanting to be like, I need to get out of here?
Yeah. Last year, we're all stuck in this. We're all committed to this. If you're listening to this podcast, it's because for one reason or another, you've committed your life to this. But there was still hope for Sam Levitt. He acknowledged that, and he decided to go pop off somewhere else. So disagreed with it at the time. I think we gave him some guff for it. But he is starting now at Arizona State. So it kind of worked out. Aiden Childs is playing fine. I didn't see how he played this week. Did you see how Arizona State did?
I didn't, but are we going to Google that?
Arizona State beat the tar out of Wyoming. Does that matter at all?
I don't know. Is Wyoming good? I don't know.
I don't know. We won't pretend that we know. Next up from Spartan 18770, should Smith have given our backup QB a couple of series Friday?
Bro, he was at the Riv. Absolutely not. Also, no. Like, here's the thing. I think if you're conceptually in on Aiden Childs as a quarterback, and this isn't something we talked about with Graham, but Greg, you were there in person. I had it on TV. Aiden Childs has an arm.
Yeah.
Has a very live arm. Like, we didn't see, notwithstanding Sam Levitt, we didn't see that true capability at all last year.
Caden Hauser didn't earn the job, for example, and he was our starting quarterback for several weeks.
Yeah.
Continue.
And even in the there was one play, one of the few instances where the pass pro was just broken. Aiden spun out of it and was able to get himself to a place where he could throw. I don't remember if he completed it or not, but like, you saw things out of Aiden Childs that indicated great things. And oftentimes some of the misses were just miscommunications between him and the wide receiver, which is another reason to be optimistic that maybe this gets cleaned up next week. All that's to say, Aiden Childs needed to live or die with the win or loss. Like, it was his to own, and if you're on board with the idea that he can be our quarterback, which I think you should be, then shit needs to happen.
Yep.
Good, bad, whatever.
Spartan 18770, I would ask you, are we in win mode right now? Like, win right now mode? And I would suggest no one thinks that we are. So if that's
Oh.
the case, there's no value to you putting in a redshirt senior who can't return next year, even if he wants to. It only invites a potential quarterback controversy, and it only takes away really valuable snaps from Aiden Childs. So if you believe that Aiden Childs is the guy moving forward, and the head coach does, then you got to give him these snaps. I think the only reason to consider giving the backup QB snaps is if you're like Arizona State and you're up 48-7 on Wyoming. In which case, then
Yahtzee.
bring him in. Bring him in. And finally, from Spartan, go ahead.
You won't read this. Mm-hmm. How weird does it feel having faith in special teams? Fuck Ross Ells.
It was a little weird.
Kevin?
It was a little weird. It was a little weird when I was going through all of the wailing and gnashing of teeth, and very little of it was focused on special teams. And it felt really good to be there. Next up from Ev 24, how do you feel about the MSU vets? Carter looked like RB2 and Foster was inconsistent. That's generous, Ev Marie. Seems like the transfers were doing better.
Yeah, I would. I'm not putting it on Carter. I will give Lynch Adams credit. Obviously, I mean, he ran a great game, and the one he ran up the middle was not actually supposed to go up the middle. He just saw the hole and took advantage of it, which is great. But I mean, even on that 4th and 1.5, I think he was the running back in there, and shit got blown up. Like,
yep.
Nathan Carter, I'm convinced is a really good running back, but he's not canine, and there are levels to these things. I'm convinced Carter could find himself a home starting on a lot of Big Ten teams, or at least getting meaningful carries. And then Foster, I think Graham pointed something out smart, which is that he was hurt towards the tail end of camp, but we don't have any speed. That's a little bit of a concern.
Yeah, Smith in his press conference talked about like running the right routes, creating separation, doing those types of things. I don't think you're going to start seeing demonstrably better wide receiver play all of a sudden next week.
I do. Yeah, the one thing that I think you might see improvement on is there were a handful of possessions, or not possessions, a handful of plays where it turned into a bit of a scramble drill. And there was miscommunication between what Childs expected the wide receiver to do and what the wide receiver did. That can get cleaned up, and that is the difference in many instances between a first down and not a first down. Wide receiver didn't sit in the zone where Childs expected. Wide receiver didn't go where Childs expected. So that might get cleaned up, and you could be like, well, things could be different. Anyway,
more
next
broadly,
up. This is for you.
I'll stay on this for you, actually. Marie 24 continues on this line of questioning, asking, do you think transfers outperforming the vets is emblematic of the Mel Tucker era?
That's actually no, because on the defensive side, there were a number of dudes who started that were Tucker recruits, and on the offensive line, there were still some guys. No, I don't think so. I think good is good. Some guys are good, some guys aren't. It just is what it is. Like, not everyone pans out.
Yep.
Greg, next up, Cedar Village Bagel. Without mentioning a single player, coach, or specific play, give me your good news, bad news for week 1. His is good news. Our turf grass looks so beautiful under the lights. And bad news, we didn't get a noticeable boost from the bad weather in the area, like the Spartans of yore.
So good news. Are you familiar with the Fast and the Furious septilogy of films or whatever we're up to right now?
Dude, I listen to How Did This Get Made, where they have Scott Adams from Parks and Rec lore. For every single release, the day after, to discuss these films.
Yeah.
Yes, very familiar.
So in the first of these, kick them off, the granddaddy of them all, our guy, Vin Diesel, is road racing none other than Ja Rule. That's right. And after that race,
Family.
or no, I think he's actually. This happens after that. He's racing. What's his name? The main character. But he has this whole thing about how winning is winning. It doesn't matter if you win by an inch or a mile. Ask any real racer. Winning is winning. And without mentioning a player, coach, or specific play, that would be my good news. My bad news, and I do really like this one, Cedar Village Bagel, the whole, rain gods thing that we have been known for a while. The bad news is this isn't our last Friday night game. There's going to be more of them. And I think there's going to be more of them in the future too, because it's going to be a bit of a slog. Next up from Kate Wall, Jonesy, pick your all Nepo starting five. So the all Doghouse was last week. This is all Nepo starting five. Must have a family connection to the program or Big Ten. Guys who earned their spot are fine. A small lineup is expected.
Well, so I'm now rethinking my read of this. Is this all Nepo Big Ten or all Nepo Michigan State?
Let's stick with MSU because we're going to
that gets a lot fucking harder.
It does it really? Whatever's easier for you.
McCaffrey's are kind of loading up the team, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And I hate to say it, but one of the Howards is in the NBA, so.
Yeah, well, because the game was basically built around making him look good for that entire season. But yes, continue.
But if we're doing all program Nepos, Davis Smith is running your point, right? He was a serviceable point guard by the time you didn't want it, but he could do it. Who else do you have? Because the other two are the very obvious ones. One of whom is still on the roster. So who else is on this list?
Kate Wall is right. This is a small lineup for sure. I can't think of any bigs. Can you think of any bigs that are in the Nepo line of dudes?
I can't think of. I'm ashamed to say I can't think of more than the three players: Davis Smith, Stevie, and Sanders' son. Who am I missing here?
You're missing.
Wait.
Kid.
Oh yeah, Hoiberg's kid. No, we've who was Malik Carr is a Nepo to a degree.
Really? What was that?
Yeah.
Did I miss that entirely? His
uncle is
Yes. Okay. Yep. I remember that now. That wasn't ever really pitched as nepotism in any way. That was oh, what a fun little connection that we have. Oh, this one's tough, Kate.
Yeah, Kate adds. I should point out. Heard the feedback last week. Should I hold these for off-season segment fishing? I had one planned weekly until B-ball, but can wait. Kate, you've done this well. Kate has done this well. You should keep them going. It's not a massive list. You've kept it to 5. We've failed you in this count, but Kate, please keep them coming. These are good bits. But truly, I'm a little stumped here, and I'm a little ashamed of it because it feels like if she's got a Nepo 5, it must be more obvious.
Yeah, there have been others.
Maybe that's what's disturbing is how common they are that we've become numb to it.
Yeah,
because all the away games, all the bye games are almost always a Nepo of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
They're all from the family,
right? And I guarantee you, our listenership is just yelling at their speakers or their headphones or whatever right now of all the obvious names that we've entirely omitted.
Listener, just stop. Hey Siri, remind me in 10 minutes to Shut the fuck up.
All
Next
right.
up,
Go for it.
Ali. ACL recovery update. I'm able to do full rotation on a bike with my knee. On the topic of rotations, which position group rotations did you like on Friday? Which rotations did you not want to see again?
Defensive line is an obvious liked on Friday, right? Like that comes immediately to mind. A lot of dudes got in there. A lot of dudes made plays. Ken Talley got called out by Jonathan Smith in his press conference. Is like,
Wasn't supposed to play that much.
I didn't know that. Did you guys know that? I didn't know that. So
Gamer.
there you go. Anything that you don't want to see again, Jonesy?
Brandon Baldwin did have the lowest Pro Football Focus score.
Okay.
I'm just saying, Stanton and Rammel, if we're growing for the future. But otherwise, look, Ed Woods looked like a stud at CB. Play Ed Woods more, and that'd be my one comment. Next up from Ali, I heard on the broadcast that the safety was the first since December 2020. Thoughts?
Well, safeties don't really happen that often. So we had a bowl game safety in 2020?
I don't know, man.
Apparently. I'm a little bit surprised it was that recent. I mean, safeties just don't really happen.
Yeah.
I've watched hundreds, if not thousands, of college football games, and the number of them that I can think of that included a safety is very low. So I'm not that worried about it.
No, I'm not.
But I've seen several safeties at Spartan Stadium, and
I guess it's a bit surprising with how good Bryce Behringer was. That's a bit surprising. But Greg, next up, Upper Director Guy asks 3 and 9.
So I thought we would spend more time in this episode talking about adjusting down expectations. We've spent very little actually so far talking about adjusting down expectations. So good job, Upper Deck Jerk Guy, bringing us back to that. Jonesy, last week spoke on the phone for a prolonged period of time. And in the course of that,
it got so long that I asked you a deeply personal question at the end that we won't discuss here, but like drinks were had, got real personal by the end of it.
Indeed. And the real personal question was, do you think it's possible that this team goes 10-2?
No, I walked you in through each of those and then said, Kevin, in your heart of hearts, do you think it's 10-2?
Well, listen, they're 1-0. So
also, I think we need to wait on making all of those assessments until next week. Let's see how Maryland goes.
Yeah.
And because I think we saw enough competence from the coaching staff that we can just say our talent level is just where it is, depending on how that Maryland game goes. And I'm not looking forward to it. Next up, from the Upper Deck Jerk Guy, does Grooch?
No.
Next up, is the no-fly zone back?
No.
Next up, Mamapaleef. Which offensive line wish list take is going to arrive first, the experience or the discipline?
Did the offensive line have a lot of penalties?
I
could
think
this be
maybe
like gap discipline, like getting into the scheme.
Jonathan Smith did say that a number of the blown runs were essentially due to one person fucking up their assignment, and it wasn't the same person, to be clear. Though Brandon Baldwin did do it more than the rest.
Sure. So let's have it be the discipline, Mamapaleef. Let's have only this week's practice more experience, and let's have it be the discipline, please.
All right. Next up, injuries and penalties. Mamapaleef. Injuries and penalties put the Gross brothers on the defensive field together, and Angelo described the experience of getting to play alongside brother Avion for the first time since growing up in Ohio as, quote, dope, end quote. When there's smoke, will they be on fire in future games? Kevin?
Is this a reference to old people calling marijuana dope? Is that what this is?
Mama Belief, I want to know if you're on fucking dope. Also, dope is not what they call marijuana anymore. In fact, it's a different drug. Mama Belief.
This is one of the lamest questions. It's just where there's smoke. The most disappointing in this is that she didn't get to sneak in unnecessary "you" for like the allure of fire in future games or something like that.
I get to see Mamopoly being like, "No, I'm not a cop. Trust, like, sell me your marijuana cigarettes, kids.
I'm dope for the dope, bro."
Narc. Next up, Mr. Neurotic Pants. Yes, Aiden Childs was undisciplined and the offensive line still sucks, but is there anything more thrilling and enjoyable than a close game where our beloved Spartans pull off a victory? Fucking love MSU victories. I got a new job, got married, and finances are stressful. But I'm still making a point to come up in a few weeks to watch MSU play Prairie View because Spartan Stadium will always be one of my happy places. First, congrats on the job, on the marriage, and you know what? Finances are stressful for everybody all the time. I don't, unless you're Matt Ishbia, but though according to Graham, apparently financing a center is stressful for him. Did you catch that?
I did. And we've got to find out more information about this in the future.
Yeah.
I guess I shouldn't be surprised that there are teams that are going to get a little bit more NIL than this, but we got to
flush that up. But anyway, listen, Mr. Neurotic Pants, I don't disagree. Winning is great. It's fun. It's fantastic. But it's also fine to have some expectations, and I didn't expect that to be tight.
But also tip of the cap. Like truly at the end of the day, Mr. Neurotic Pants, this gets to what I'm trying to be more mindful about in my fandom of just appreciating what is fun and letting glance off my back what is not. And I know that this episode does not reflect that, so I have more work to do on myself. Next up for Mr. Neurotic Pants, Jonesy, I don't have BTN, but Blaha babbled boisterously about a bootleg. What is a bootleg?
First, Mr. Neurotic Pants got your other email. We'll respond to it. Bootleg is when essentially the quarterback rolls out to one side or the other. So that's all it is. Next up, Gretch. It's clear that MSU's offense isn't Power 4 material at the moment. Even so, is there a possibility that the Green and White's defense will demoralize opponents enough to allow a few Spartan victories once conference play starts? I think they could generally rattle a team under the right circumstances.
Would have to be the right circumstances. I got the impression that the defense was adequate, passable, but was not a going to go win games for you type of defense. Was a can keep you in games, could or beat maybe a overmatched opponent. But I didn't get the impression that this was a like what I was referencing before about certain defenses that outscored the offense in the first game of the season. That wasn't the impression that I got. So maybe against Prairie View, something like this could happen. But I'm guessing in conference play, even with this defense, you're going to need to score points to win, which is a bit of a concern at the moment.
All right. Next up, Beppe Plum, rant of the week. The FAU quarterback is the Brad Davison of college football. FAU is my chosen hometown school, but F that dude. Owsley and Sparty should tag team him and teabag the refs very respectfully afterwards.
Very respectfully.
No hard feelings. Also, Beppe, I thought you were from Tennessee?
The legend of Beppe Plum grows greater and greater all the time, and we have not been able to figure this out.
Including this next question, which was illustrated, and he's tagged over, I'm convinced, the part of this that matters. My students get mad at me for being the strict rule follower. I was demonstrating the emergency window when I noticed that I vandalized my own classroom when I was a student 27 years ago. Pencil won't erase or clean off with alcohol wipes after 27 years. Now you know, sadly.
And basically it says, well, he wrote this over, Beppe with a Spartan helmet covering, again, probably the most relevant section that would reveal certain mysteries to us. But then it says underneath that, the tag was in this class in 97, 98.
And 99? There's a 99 there too.
How do you think that feels to teach in a classroom that you sat in as a student? Can you even begin to speculate what that would be like?
Could you imagine doing a podcast with someone you've known since?
Okay, that's enough.
All right.
That's enough.
All right, let's get out of here. This has been a great episode of Can't Read, Can't Write. Kevin, not the win we were hoping for, but the win we got. Go green.
Go white, Michael Jones.